I've interviewed some incredibly famous people for the kudos of the show. Famous people are not necessarily always guaranteed to have a better play numbers. People who are stuck on episode 3 are usually the ones who are editing themselves. They making all the mistakes because to me it was about like, how can I save time? How can you create systems? The best part of podcasting was actually just enjoying the patience and the process and not overthinking it too much. It's ultimately, you never know what's going to happen, and that's why you go with it. Sometimes I tell myself that I could have gone more out of this person, I could have done this, I could have done that. But ultimately, I'm only as good as the guest.
Welcome to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Neil Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast in 2019, and since then I went on to found 7 Million Bikes Podcast, where we've now worked with over 100 podcast shows, helped produce thousands of episodes, helped with millions of downloads, and helped many shows get to the top of the podcast charts. I then recently opened up the first dedicated podcast studio in Vietnam, where I'm based, right here in Saigon, called Saigon Podcast Studio. Now, I started this show, Smarter Podcasting, to help share with you how to make the best podcast possible. So in this show, I share with you my tips, my tricks, my failures, and I talk to industry experts as well to help give you all the information you need to make an amazing show. Now, in this episode today, I am beyond excited because I am talking to one of our clients at 7 Million Bikes Podcast, but not just one of our clients, our longest standing client. And they're about to put out, with our help, their 100th episode. So I am really excited to share with you how you can also get to 100 episodes. My guest today is the host of the Daring Creativity podcast. I am very, very excited to talk to Radim Malinic. Radim, congratulations on 100 episodes.
Thank you. It's a milestone that you hope to reach. And then you realize, because you're so busy making this stuff, it's like, oh, it's just happened. Because, I mean, let's be honest, it's just a number, but it's a good round number to actually show that it all works, that it's a result of a system, curiosity, tenacity, obsession, and also it being a tool that I never thought I would have. You know, like it's something that I'm so grateful that I've started, and it's the public accountability that you can't skip a week, you can't skip an episode. You can't just not show up. So yeah, thanks for being part of it. And it's great to hear that I'm the longest client of 7 Million Bikes. Because look, as you know, it's been a great partnership, great collaboration. And yeah, it's kind of like, it feels very easy. That's the good bit about it. It feels easy.
Love it. So let's just very quickly, why did you start a podcast in the first place?
Well, I'll be honest. I published 2 books. In 2023, I published my book number 5 and 6. And I had an audio book produced as well. And I'm thinking, well, how do I get it out there, drip feed it, make a content out of it? And I'm thinking, well, since the books were about helping creative industry, why don't I just ask my friends first to come and talk to me on a podcast? Because you mentioned you started your podcast in 2019. I wanted to start mine in 2018. I listened to a friend of mine had a podcast. I'm like, this sounds like a good idea. And I might have told you that before. I switched on QuickTime, recorded myself for 3 minutes. I was like, yeah, this is rubbish. I'm not ready. And I got back to it, but I felt I had content because I think the longevity is in the theme. Longevity is in the theme. Now I feel like after 2 years, it's actually not even been 2 years of podcasting. We literally got 2 weeks to go. So we did, out of, was it 52 weeks or so, 51 weeks or 52 weeks. So we still like, it's been a blizzard of like, let's get it done and let's do it. Because I realized that, creating a podcast was about a theme. Like if I had a theme, then it's much easier to actually piece it around it. Like when it was just like, hey, let's podcast for the hell of it, let's make a Radim Manilic show. It's like, it doesn't have guardrails. But for the last two years, I've realized not only like how to promote my books and how to explain the topics of these books, but also how to create a theme of a new upcoming book. And through the 32 weeks of exploring the theme, I realized, okay, I'm actually writing another 2 books as opposed to 1. And I know that daring creativity is very ownable to me. So the best part of podcasting was actually just enjoying the patience and the process and not overthinking it too much. It's ultimately, you never know what's going to happen, and that's why you go with it. But having, the guiding light, the North Star, actually helps so much to creators, because you got something to talk about rather than hoping that people bring their stories.
But what made you commit to the long term right off the bat?
This is the thing. You don't think about long term. I'm very much, through the podcast, I'm talking about the situation which is now versus how. I was very much in the now. I didn't know how to do this. I had no idea. And as you know, for our conversation, I've been taking hints and tips of like how to be a better interviewer, like how to streamline some things. But it was about the moment of now. Like I felt I'm now ready, and we'll work out the how. And you know what? I don't know how long in this for, but there is no reason to stop. Maybe if I ever run out of people to interview, we might stop. But I found the systems that work. And it's one of the things that, you know what, I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm committed to it being my thing. And I know the benefits of having a podcast that have changed my career incredibly. I have spent 20 odd years being a designer, creative director, kind of showing everyone visual pieces. And they go, yes or no, yes or no. Whereas I felt like I found this leveler. I'm in the industry as my own voice, and I don't have to travel to the other side of the world to speak to 200, 300, 400 people. I can speak to thousands of people from my podcast and actually show them more of who I am.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's, I even say to people all the time, if you can talk to 50 people through your podcast, I mean, just imagine 50 people showing up every week to your town hall or to your meeting and listening to what you have to say. And not because they have to be there, because they want to be there. They've chosen to be there and they want to know what you have to say. That I've been telling people that for years. And I literally just reminded myself of that a few days ago. I was like, wow, that's incredible.
I think there is a breaking point when you're like, at the beginning, you're like, how many people are listening? How many downloads are we getting? How many this and that? And then you realize you're too busy making stuff. I've created so many other things around the podcast, and it's a part of my ecosystem for part of my new book. It's an integral part. We've created an online community for daringforever.com where, I actually get the guests now to go and chat to the people who listen to the podcast, so they got kind of direct access. It's in one space. And it's just showing me like how to create this ecosystem, because in the process of, let's say, me running a branding agency for nearly a quarter of a century, you try to find the tactics of like, okay, how do I get my clients? How do you advise your clients? And obviously, like the beautiful shop front is nice, but identifying like who do you want to talk to, what do you want to do, is a totally different game. Because we've got a client in Asia, and they're like, okay, we are this company, we produce X, Y, Z. And I said, how many potential clients have you got? And they're like, for what we make, 5. There's in the whole of India, there's 5 clients. And I said, okay, well, let's find a way of how to get them. And as opposed to knocking on their door, hoping like, hey, do you like our product? Let's bring them to your podcast. Like actually start talking about what you make and how you make, and speak to experts, create it as a knowledge base. Because, people can do SEO with blog articles or whatever, but you already, as you know yourself, Neil, you interviewing your clients, your potential clients, and you showing them who you are rather than going cold calling emails or sending them something and hoping for the best. You create that reverse loop that changes everything, because all of a sudden you realize, hey, I might be your supplier, future supplier, but let's create a podcast so people know who you are. And I have set up quite a few podcasts for my clients, and I'm using that as another thing that we can sell as a solution, because it's a leveler or a sort of beneficial tool in that marketing toolkit, because there's a lot of people who are still not podcasting. So in the way of sort of finding the opportunities for myself, for my clients, for my new way of working, it's been incredible, because it feels it's current, it's now, and anyone can, press a button and go record, but it's how we create a system for it to record, to get it out there, to brand it, to make it look professional, which is, I think, the most important part of podcasting now. Like, how do you create conversations that you want to listen to? Because as you know, there's so many shows out there, but only few of them only still sound good. The rest is just amateurism.
I've listened to some podcasts that are professionally made by big studios, and I get really frustrated. Sometimes at the sound quality, sometimes at the editing, sometimes at the structure. I'm like, what are you doing? There's one I've just started listening to where it's celebrities, right? It's two people, comedians, funny people that are British. I'm not going to name names, but I wanted to get and hear what they have to say. But it's so bad. I've had to give up. Like, one of them just talks over the other the whole time. They know that they were meant to have a niche because they say in the first episode, oh, we didn't really want to have a niche, but we told we have to. So they chose some random thing. Most episodes, they spend about 20 minutes just randomly talking before. And then like the last episode I listened to, they're like, oh, so should we do the thing now? And it's like, you guys you're leaning on your celebrity, and that's fine. There's so many structural things about this podcast that frustrate me. So yeah, it does take effort to make a professional podcast. But who has been the most valuable person or guest that you've ever interviewed?
That's interesting. I don't think I've got the one, and I'm very careful of not telling anyone like, oh, this has been the best episode so far, because I think it'll be unfair on the previous guests. But I like people with deep layers, if that makes sense. People who have already worked on themselves, people who have lived life and prodded it from different angles, because they made the conversation. Because sometimes I tell myself that I could have got more out of this person, I could have done this, and I could have done that. But ultimately, I'm only as good as the guest. I can't make them live extra experience. They can tell me on the show. So I thought initially when I would start a podcast that I would be speaking to Gen Zers or Gen Alphas. I'm thinking I will be reaching a new market, but I am Gen X or millennial. I think I'm Gen X, and the show is very much 25 to 45 sort of audience. Let's say 30 to 45 to 50, because it's the people who have already gone through their sort of twists and turns and gone over the bumps and tried to work out their creative lives. So they listen to people who have been on a similar journey. So I got to very much accept and enjoy the audience that I'm serving. And therefore, the nature of the guests I'm looking for is like people who have got something to say. Because in my industry, for many, many years or even decades, if you created something visually engaging, you don't have to talk. Like, oh, that's marvelous. Whereas I very much feel, and that's the part of my book Daring Forever, which is part of the podcast, is the fact that the sonic branding, the verbal expression is going to be a lot more important in what we do than creativity per se, because creativity, you can jump around and find your ways, in whatever solution you need. Whereas if you base everything on a skill, then AI will replace you or someone else will replace you. Whereas I think when you double down over who you are, what you want to say, what you want to stand for, it's going to be a lot more important, because you will have a voice in the room. Because I believe everyone is unique in their own way. I mean, we are all equal in creativity and life, but we are unique in the way how we see the world. And I think to be able to stand up, to articulate it, to say it, how you see the world and what can you do for everyone, is going to be the differentiator. Because we go through 3 different stages in life, I believe. The first is very much about I. I is the egocentric identity. No, let me validate this life. Am I in the right place? And then you go, actually, I want to see what I can do for us. What can I do for this? And then there's a stage, which is the most generous one, which is we. Like, this is the society, and what can I do for the greater good of everybody else? Because I feel like the older we get, and we get more generous, more empathetic, and let go of the sense of identity. Because I did that very classic mistake, like every podcaster with their first episodes, be like, you ask your guest a question and then you start answering as if the question was for you. I was like, okay, that's painful. I need to learn how to let go. And as you've seen from my editorial passes, I just remove like 10 minutes of myself from most podcasts, because I use my answers. Obviously, I talk for the context with my guest, but I remove myself. So I'm there as little as possible to create the space for the guests, to make them shine. And as you know, I'm quite not cutthroat, but quite sort of focused on like making it as streamlined as possible, because hardly anyone is a beautifully eloquent, polished guest. But with the edits, we can make them sound beautifully polished, because not many people are media trained. conversations are human, but with that tweak of making it sound professional, I get people from, high up top from amazing companies going, we knew your quality was good, but thank you. This is like even better than we expected. So in a long-winded answer, I don't have a favorite episode, but I've got favorite experience of this, that, like you have a great deep conversation with people, and then you can make that conversation sound even better.
I've had the same feedback before on my other show, Discover Vietnam, where people have come on and then they hear the episode and they're like, you made me sound amazing. And to be honest, I'm like, you already sounded good. I didn't do that much, but yeah, we're good at what we do. And it's funny you mentioned that, because just the last episode we did of yours, one of our editors did the first edit and I listened to it and it sounded good, sounded great. Then I saw the transcript, which I hadn't heard, and I hadn't realized, no disrespect to your guest, and we're not going to obviously name who they are, but oh my goodness, every second word was, like I saw how much had been cut when I looked at the transcript. When I listened to it, it just sounded fine, sounded great, couldn't hear any cuts. I was like, yep, no, totally normal. And then when I saw the transcript and how much, it was one of the most amounts of us I'd ever seen on a transcript that had been cut.
Everyone's a human, and no one comes prepared. Like, no one knows what we're going to talk about. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I've got very limited notes, as I always show 2 blank pieces of paper to my guests, and they're like, we're going to work it out. And to most of them, that's a relief, because they can be just themselves. And I think creating those conditions for guests is very important. And some people are beautifully eloquent. I had Debbie Millman on my show, who's been podcaster for 20 years. She's part of the TED Network, consistently getting millions of downloads. Like she's my superhero. She's one of the reasons why I've started, and one of the reasons why I try to emulate a show which is about humans and have evergreen stories about, like, again, how we are equal in life and creativity. And when she showed up, she was like talking to me through just a mic, just a MacBook, and I'm like, Debbie, you have a microphone, right? And she's like, oh yeah, I have it somewhere. And she pulls out Blue Yeti. And I'm like, okay, how, what? But it kind of shows you that there's no such thing as a magic dust bin or some sort of fairy dust. Like, even the most professional people are just still people, because they've got their producers, they've got their systems in place. So I was expecting her to show up like in a studio with everything. And she was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I can plug in a microphone. I'm like, you've made 650 episodes over the last 20 years, but it's that leveler. It's that leveler. And I wanted to have a podcast which is about a human conversation. And I can't really think of anyone who would be, 100% like, whose episode would just go out and just be fine. Like, okay, we don't need to do anything, because ultimately, you don't even know what happens on radio shows that, that go out or whatever. Like, the magic of editing is there for everyone. And we are just getting down the trickle down effect of the technology to be able to do it for us. So,
we're running a professional studio here, and we had one of the SD cards got full in the middle of a recording last week and stopped recording, but you don't find out till afterwards. And through the magic of AI these days, we were able to take the audio from, and this is not the first time we've had to do this, because sometimes the SD card has been corrupted or something that's out with your control, but we were able to take the audio from the camera microphone, which is never meant to be used. And when you listen to it, it's absolutely garbage, like unlistenable. And somehow we run it through Adobe Enhance and it comes out the other end and it sounds amazing. So even we can be so professional, you still have to do the best that you can. But it's also interesting you said about having a podcast gives you that personal voice. And we literally had a client in the studio today recording, and he was saying the same thing. And he was saying something that I've been saying for so long, is eventually everybody will have a podcast. Everybody's already making videos. A few years ago, podcast was just audio only. Now you've got to do video as well, really, to get your face out there and your voice, for people to trust your brand and know who you are in this day and age now.
Interesting thought, because I think you can choose to do video or not. And I think it just depends on how good is your content, how good is your narrative, your guests, your production, your values. Because I think there's still space for audio only, because I always get it guided with the way of like, how do I see it? Like, what do I consume? So I create stuff for myself in the way what I have got time for. And there are some shows I only watch on YouTube, and I never listen to them on my my walks or in my headphones, and vice versa. Like there's some video shows that just I only listen to in my ear. So that really makes sense. Like I just listen to the audio only. So I think what's really important is it's the content. And it was realizing, the other day I realized when one of my friends called me the C word. In fact, not a C word, double C word. And I'm like, oh my God, unfortunately, you're right here. I've become content creator.
I was going to say, what is the double C? I didn't know. Oh,
Content
right.
creator, yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's important. And I think it's important. I think it's something that it's unstoppable. It's a leveler. And it's just using the advantage of what this could be.
Now, as we know, most podcasts die before episode 10, the dreaded Podfade. So what has kept this podcast alive for not just 10 episodes, but 100, or as we kind of talked about, 200 episodes, because you basically do 2 a week?
Do 2 a week, yeah. Well, I had more than 10 friends to interview at first, so that was easy. And once I realized, and once I found out like how I can do this stuff a little bit better, it gives you a key to the door that you thought might not ever open, because I've interviewed some incredibly famous people for the kudos of the show. Famous people are not necessarily always guaranteed to have a better play numbers. It's just the ability to give friends a space and just give something back. And we talk about the third stage. So it's giving something back, and actually giving people a platform to express themselves, to help them to have an hour of basically sonic branding. They can send potential clients or saying what they think about. And it's the curiosity, like exploring curious minds. And speaking to people who really push the concept of daring creativity to the places where they're showing others what's possible. So for me, I wanted to create a space which talks about that side of the things, which will always be evergreen. I don't want to talk about business tactics. I don't want to talk about X, Y, Z. I want to talk about things that are going to be evergreen for a while, and bring the human in a conversation when they realize, as I told you, like when they realize there's no questions, they're like, oh, that's a relief. That's great. So it was, yeah. I've still got, we're at number 100. I've got another 10 episodes pre-recorded, and there's a list of never-ending people, to carry on. And we're going to change the theme. We're going to make a book about a podcast. Basically, the year of podcasting is daring creativity. I'm going to turn it into a book with, showcasing the community and like what it all means, and then carry on, because it creates content in a way that shows you what is the valuable way of getting people together and understand, exactly like you're repeating, how we are all equal. Because it's easy to think that someone's on a pedestal, someone's great, but they've got the stuff to go through. They're still the same people as you.
For that person that's on episode 3, maybe they're on episode 9, or they've not even started yet, or they have started and they're thinking of quitting, what would you say to them? Why should they work with a production partner like us?
Usually people who think that they should do it all themselves. Because, I run 4 different businesses. I'm thinking of starting potentially like a live broadcast from my community. Like, the live looks complicated. But people who are stuck on episode 3 are usually the ones who are like, they're editing themselves, adding in something really basic. They're making all the mistakes, because to me, it was about like, how can I save time? How can you create systems? So let go and actually spend money, because I'm a big fan of Dan Martell, who made a book called Buy Back Your Time. How do you spend a quarter of your hourly rate on somebody who can help you? And that's been absolutely the biggest godsend to think about that way, because I used to have a staff, like for my creative work. Now I work with freelancers. Like I have got dozens of people that I work with almost on a daily basis for various businesses, what I'm doing, because I want to be in charge of, my dopamine addiction, going, what can I create? What is that like? Because ultimately you can show people what can be done.
Well, Radim, I love it. Congratulations on 100 episodes, or 200 really, because we are putting out the main episode, then a smaller episode. So 2 a week, over 1 year. I'm so excited to reach 200 episodes. Thank you so much for trusting us. We've loved working with you. We love producing your podcast. It gives us a real big sense of achievement, and love seeing the results of it. So thank you so much for trusting us. And remember, if you want to work with 7 Million Bikes Podcast, just get in touch. Go to 7million bikes.com. you can send me a message right there, or you can book a call with me and I'll be happy to chat about how we can help you put a system in place to save you time and ultimately money. And remember, if you do like Smarter Podcasting, please rate, review, subscribe, follow, turn on the notifications, and best of all, share this podcast with someone else who wants to make the best podcast possible. Radim, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. And yeah, thanks for all your help, because I think we had the number 100, 200 total, and here's to another 100 at least, and we see where it takes us before we decide on another 100. So yeah, thanks very much. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Cheers.